Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Dion is correct in saying that I'm a bit upset. Friday afternoon at 4 o'clock, when I started to read the title, I realized that I'm totally the wrong person, firstly. And secondly, I'll have to bullshit my way through this session today in terms of what I'm going to say. By introduction, I'm Vic. I head up IT for Free State University. I've spent most of my life in industry, Sasol, Nedbank, Barclays, overseas, whatever the case might be. So the world of academia is foreign to me. I'm not an academic, so don't let the title fool you. It's a title reserved for my wife. When she says doctor, then I know I've got problems. So don't worry about that. The project environment was something that I was involved in quite a few years ago in my younger life, in my early career. And I think the nature of project management has changed radically since I practiced the practice of project management. Given what is expected today in terms of project managers. Now, from where I sit in the organization, I order things to happen, and other people that are experts in my division or my department takes care of what we do in terms of direction. So I've got I think for the first time in my life for the last 5 years that I've been at Free State, a very decent, upscaled project management team, and my colleague Nico Becker sitting there with a big smile on his face, heads that function up. So he's going to moderate me today in terms of what happens in project management. So don't expect any academic presentation from me. I'm going to talk to you from the heart. I'm going to talk to you from where I am in life and what I do. And as I said to my colleagues, having an MBA or something nowadays means nothing. It's a certificate against the wall. It's what you do with it that makes the difference. And now, I've been through the pains of an MBA early on in my life, and I must tell you, from all the stuff that I've did academically, is perhaps the MBA the one that works the hardest for me, because it gives me the essential background to make the statements, to make the judgments, and to also gauge me myself in terms of what I do as a person in an organization. So, excuse me for not being academic by nature. But what I'm going to talk to you about today is, I like the word real world, and for that I will forgive you. It's a practitioner's view. It's what I do. And it might not be according to what you've learned in project management. But that's the way it is in my environment at this time with the conditions that I have at this time. So the principles apply. But there's no two projects in my life that I could say mimic one another in any way. I also made a mistake early on in my life to say that if you're a project manager, a purebred project manager, you could manage anything from building a pool to building a spaceship to manage an intellectual property issue or whatever the case may be. And I said you should be agnostic of the project. And I think it's still to a large extent that way. But then I became older. And I'm going to speak to you today to reinforce what I've said now. Because I think the better project manager is the person that understands the field in which he operates. There are certain constraints that you work against when you actually, a project manager is in a civils project or a mechanical project or a chemical project or an IT project for that matter. So everything that I'm going to say today is against the backdrop of IT and how IT is deployed in an organization. And if you look at what's happening, and I'm going to spend some time on that to give you an idea why the context is important, of why I'm saying what I'm saying at this stage. So it seems that I'm going to talk about project risk, communication management, and then the real-world perspective on the impact of change on the project environment with the resultant implications for risk and communication management. Okay, So here we go. Right, ladies and gentlemen, many years ago I was working for Sasol, and I had a mentor that was a very simple, mundane, down-to-earth person. And he was known as Vic Coetzee. Now, he passed on already, so somewhere he's pushing clouds around somewhere today. But I have to give homage to him, because he always said to me in a very simple way, when you do a presentation, you first tell the people what you're going to tell them. And then you tell them. And then you tell them what you told them. And it's something that I'll never forget, because it makes so much sense. So this is what I'm going to do today. My action plan is then, I'm firstly going to sign a disclaimer to tell you why I'm doing the things that I'm doing. I'm going to explain the format, the context, the perspective, the workflow. I'm going to spend some time on this perspective especially because it's important to us. Then I'm going to focus on project management. Now this morning, 4 o'clock, I woke up and realized that I have to do things differently. So I was here 4:30 trying to salvage my presentation, to make the changes that some way popped up in my mind last night while sleeping. So I made those changes. I haven't test driven them yet, but I'll see the reactions today when I present them to you. Then I'm going to talk about risk management. I'm going to talk about communication management, change management, and then I'm going to look at the synthesis of putting it all together in one way or another, so that you deal with a collective and a comprehensive whole. And then a short conclusion, and then I'm going to ask somebody else to answer the questions. And Nico, you're most likely the candidate for that. Right, so with that said, here's my disclaimer, and you'll find a lot of pictures. I come from Bloom, so pictures means a lot. Okay, I don't understand the words always, but the pictures tells me something. Firstly, I need to tell you that, and I see my arrows have moved. I use an Apple computer, ladies and gentlemen. I'm upper class. So, right, so yeah, I'm a bit more upper class, a bit more up there. So I'm presenting this to you on a Windows platform, and I'm sorry to say that the quality, as always, is so unreal. But this is a practitioner's view. And it's an operational view, and I need to balance that for you in terms of what you know. So you're the experts in project management. But the real world tag still remains. Secondly, it's about technology on the one side and business on the other side. Lastly, it's an implied change. And then the whole thing that I was really, I'm not happy with this presentation, Corne. Yeah, I think we should change it, because the reason being I'm losing the context and the slides of this regard. But there's a readiness to change and a readiness to adopt. And the real issues here are the issues related to what the business wants and what the business requires and what we as an IT division can deliver. And then it's about risk and mitigation at the end of the day. And you're all well versed in mitigation and risk. And if you're not, risk is the driver for organizations. I write quite a few strategies for organizations in my life, my private life. And I met an old colleague of mine this morning here. It was a huge surprise to see him again. And we together consulted quite a few companies earlier on in my life. And for the last 5 years or 6 years, I haven't seen him, but I know where he is. The whole issue of strategy, for instance, is to write a strategy with two things in mind. Number one, where you want to go, and the risk that you have to mitigate. If you write a strategy for anything else, you're padding the actualities of life. You're adding to the strategy that should not be there, because you're facing a growth requirement versus, secondly, the risks that you need to mitigate. So I'm heavy on risks, even for the institution at this stage. Right. Oh, what are you going to do? Are you going to give me a new presentation? Or remember, I must present it. Don't give me something I haven't even read. No, it's an HDMI connection. I've got the newest Mac. Up there. So it's, okay, I'm going to use my Mac then. Right, so ladies and gentlemen, with your permission then, The second part of the disclaimer is that little graphic at the bottom. Please recognize that I'm an IT person, so I'm not going to be a specialist in your specific areas, and I assume that you've got very specific areas that you do project management in. This is an IT perspective. It's quite a complex area that we are moving in at this stage, especially what's happening in the world today. Right. So there's the outline of the presentation that my mentor at Sasol used to say. Firstly, I'm going to give you an idea what I'm talking about and what we're going to talk about today. And then I'm going to talk to you about that stuff. And then just to consolidate, we're going to tell you what I told you to make sure that there's no uncertainty and allow you the opportunity for questions. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, this is the first part of the journey then, and then Friday afternoon. I had to unpack the title in some way or another, understand what is expected of me on that fateful Wednesday morning next week. And I had to understand for myself what I need to talk about. So if I looked at the title, I said, number one, there's a project issue, there's a risk issue, there's a communication issue, and then there's the management of all this. Then there's a world, that point 5 actually should point to real world perspective. There's impact there, there's change there, there's the project environment and the implications. So I've isolated more or less 8 issues that we need to take care of in one way or another. And that's my way of dealing with the real world. I break it down to what I think is there, and I deal with them. So it's a bite-sized approach. And this is what I had to derive from this. And then what I normally do when there's uncertainty, I start drawing pictures. And this is the picture of the context that I need to talk to you about. So the question mark indicates that I might be wrong. But the way I see it now is that in the blue box there must be a linkage to the real world. The world that we are moving in today in terms of IT. Secondly, that there's a project management issue, a risk management issue, a change management issue, and the communications surrounding that. But if you look at project management, there's a project environment behind the project, and there's also the issue of a project risk. So risk comes in different formats, and I will talk about risks in a bit of later part of the presentation. But if you look at change management, it's a huge issue today. Have you seen, ladies and gentlemen, and I think they call them millennials or something like that. I can't spell it. But anyway, and there's a lot of being said about that. The moment they go into a cell phone shop, their eyes lighten up. And when I was a kid, I was blamed for taking things apart because I wanted to know how they worked. It's not happening today. The moment that you lift that cell phone out of the box, you would like to have what we refer to as out-of-the-box gratification. That all your needs be addressed by this. And there's less focus today on how this thing works. Because if we press the on switch, Twitter, Facebook, all of those social media platforms should be there. And it's not wrong thinking that way. It's used as a tool and a device, even by some of the people in the audience now as we speak. But anyway, it's used as a tool and a device, where it was different in the past because we took things apart, because we could take them apart. So I quickly understood how a lawnmower worked, how a bicycle worked, the things that were in my youth. That's not necessarily part of your living world today. For the last 5 years, I haven't lifted the bonnet of my car. Because there I know there's someone out there taking care of that for me. If you tell me now and put 2 engines next to each other, identify yours, I wouldn't be able to do so. And the same happens to technology. And I did an experiment with my team the other day while in a meeting. I said to them, you give me your watch, your wristwatch. And I said to him, now, I've just taken your watch. To have it back, you'll have to describe your watch to me. And it took that person quite a while to describe his own wristwatch. It's something that we look at every day, every second, every 10th minute. But if I should ask you now, tell me what your watch looks like. Will you be able to do so? The same applies to tech. It's assumed to be there. It's assumed to deliver a function. And those are the issues that we start dealing with when we deal with project management in the world of IT. So just to reiterate, I have to look at the real world perspective. I have to look at project management, which actually subconsists of, for instance, the environment and the risks associated with the project, the risk management issues themselves, change management, impact of change, implications, and communication. How many risk factors do you deal with today? How many risk categories do you identify in your business? 1, 2, 100? See, those are the things that we need to get a common language on, to understand what we're dealing on in terms of what are we dealing with when we talk about project risk. What do we talk about implied risk? And I'll get to that just now. Right, so I told you that I'm an IT guy. Now the oval shape sets perspective, and this is the part that I want you to understand now. Why I'm saying the things that I'm saying. What lies in my perspective area? Because everything is colored by what is behind it in terms of a perspective. So if I look at a perspective, and there's reason for this, what does project management look like against the perspective of IT? Because the perspective that I'm going to give you is the practice of IT. So I need to tell you the background to all of what I'm saying today is IT. So project management for IT might be different than project management for a civils project, an engineering project, or whatever project. The second thing that I need to talk to you about against that background is what does risk management look like? Because in IT, we're dealing with other risks than the risks associated with banking, financing, engineering, teaching and learning, etc. And those risks are not necessarily shared amongst different disciplines. They are unique to a discipline. As much as project management might be unique to a specific area. Next thing, communication. This is perhaps the most difficult component of project management for me. And we struggle with that. We don't get it right every time. What is implied in a communication or what you send out is not normally what is understood by that same message. So you need to be very clear in your project communication, and there's different forms of project communication that I've identified that I would like to highlight. But the last part of the context is then the part associated with change. And this, unfortunately, is the one area that we dismally fail in. And even today, we assume that the people understand the project. We assume that the deliverables of the project are of such a nature that everybody will endorse them, buy them. There's people that's out there, for very good reasons, that understand what you're doing. Because it's not their field. I'm busy deploying what we refer to as dual-factor authentication. What is dual-factor authentication? For this university, have you ever heard of it? Dual means two factors, two mechanisms to authenticate yourself to the network, to the university. It's a security measure. So I sent out a message to my community one day. Sat behind my desk and in full faith wrote this beautiful message. I was even impressed by my spelling and the use of the vernacular of English. But anyway, I'm using words that I don't understand myself. But anyway, so I was writing this message and I thought, shit, Coetzee, Coetzee, this is a nice message. Everybody will understand it. That Monday, I got a pack of emails to tell me, what are you trying to tell me? Are you going to enforce us all because you come from a banking environment to start wearing uniforms and standing? And that lady also asked me, what role did you play in the bank? And I said, no, I was a teller. Sorry, man. And I haven't fixed that too today. So the spin of that is she complained that the IT head of our university was a teller in his previous life. But I'm not going to fix that at this stage. But people understand these things from different perspectives. And communication from an IT perspective is different from a perspective from another area. And then we get to the difficult part. Now that we've identified project management against this background, and the background hasn't changed, it's still IT, or engineering, or banking, or financing, whatever the case might be. But we need to look at project management, risk management, communication, and lastly then the change management against this perspective. And then we start to look at the linkages. How do they integrate to one another? How do they relate to one another? How do they speak to one another? And they have to speak to each and every one in a different way, and that's why communication becomes different. Because the people managing change in your project is not the people doing the project execution. They need a different message. And we do the next one, because now from a risk perspective, the risk manager will come to you and say, hey, I've got these risks. I've got no idea where you're addressing them in your project plan. I've got no idea where you're communicating them and how we're going to implement a change program behind it. And then it gets worse because the same happens to the communication manager and the same happens to the change manager, and then you end up with this. And this is where you don't want to be. I can't manage that. The moment that you've got multiple stakeholders with multiple intents, with multiple outcomes, with multiple expectations, it becomes a very complex problem. And I think that is sometimes why projects fail before they even start, in my mind. And how many projects, what's the percentage of projects that fail in the world? I didn't know until Friday evening when I started reading on it. 70 to 80%. I always thought it was less. But none of the sources, and I rely on Wikipedia, but anyway, none of the sources told me less than 70 to 80%. Some of them even more and higher. But projects fail for a reason, and they fail for very good reasons. And this might be one of them that I'm looking at. Okay. I told you now what I'm going to tell you. Any questions at this point? You're welcome, because no questions means that you fully understand everything I've said. Happy? Okay. Feel like an ice cream vendor. Everybody's okay. Right. Now I'm going to tell you the stuff that I think this presentation is all about. And again, I'm going to use pictures. Remember this diagram? This diagram is now presented by these little diagrams. Right. You see the context oval, and you see the 4 blocks. What are the 4 blocks again? Project management, communication, change, and I say. And they are caught up in the workflow now. You see the red dot changes every time as you move around the circle? And that's the focus that I'm going to give to that. When I do a presentation part of the slide and you see the red dot moving, it means that we are on a different aspect of the presentation. So the red brick oval now tells you we need to pay context. We need to understand the context better. Right. I don't use word, I use pictures. Tell me what they mean. Let's start upper left-hand corner. Because believe me or not, you are touched by each and every one of them as you are sitting there today. Right, upper left-hand corner. Social media. What's the problem with social media nowadays, ladies and gentlemen? Too many publishers, not enough editors. Right. There's a freedom behind social media that people believe they can use even to hurt the other party. One of my staff members, he's not here today. He actually won a defamation of character suit against a student of this university about 3-4 months ago for him insulting him on Facebook. And it was a huge case. Now, this is a student. Just look at the situation now. She took it upon herself to take on his whole family. And she smeared his whole family in a very bad way. And he went to court and he went to lawyers. And the court order says, this student must pay damages to the staff member that works with me for several years at the rate of $10,000 a month. She's a student. She can hardly afford her books. She can hardly afford food. She's not married. And she's got a bill that she needs to pay of 10,000 Rand a month for, I think it's 10 or 20 years, whatever the case might be. Gone is her career. She's sitting with debt to the value of 2-3 million. Be careful. So the world of social media is where you are influenced and be more influenced in future. Upper left-hand corner. The middle one in the top row is the issue of digital security. Number one challenge in this university, number one challenge in the banks, number one challenge in the world today. The most expensive challenge to deal with. Most expensive projects that you have to deal with is the world of digital security. I've just spent 8.8 million Rand on this university for 4 little boxes like this. But those are the machines that keep us healthy, keep us safe. The problem is, by the 1st of December, they will be outdated again. This is the world that you need to be aware of. How safe is your phone that's in front of you now? Who was your last post to? Which website did you last visit? See, those are the things that are becoming issues in your life. If you're a big porn watcher like me, I need to know you because I need to exchange some porn with you. I think there's better porn than what I've had looked again last night. So, so who's the big porn watchers here? Huh? Well, Andre, you're the only one with the hand up. Okay. Be careful. Be careful where you go. Be careful of YouTube, what you download from YouTube, what you steal from YouTube. Digital security is a major issue at this stage. The number one money spinner in this university to protect the university. Number 3, consumer rights. I do have rights, yeah. But sometimes, right is a privilege when you accept the responsibility of owning that right. If you accept the terms and agreements, the terms and conditions of Facebook, and you press click there that I accept that. How many of you read those things as they come by? I don't. What do? I tick the box and I move on. Do me a favor. Please go and read one of those license agreements, one of those certificate agreements, and you find out what you've been endorsed for. I read an interesting anecdote the other day of this elderly person in a small community somewhere in the world, might even be Windburg or Brandfort, close to us here. And this older man started posting very serious accusations against a younger member of the community. Up to the point where that younger person lost his or her job, was chased out of town. You know, we small communities. And that younger person took the elder person to court. And the older person just claimed in court that he didn't know what he was doing, etc. And he's going to take it back. And the judge said to him, now listen, my friend, before I sentence you, because you are guilty, I want you to write down every statement that you've made on a piece of paper. And he forced him to do so. And he said to him, now, tear all of them up into small bits like confetti. And when you drive home tonight, You throw them out of the window. So like I did. The next morning they came to the court. The guy said to him, the judge said to the old man, have you collected all the papers that you threw out your window yesterday? And he said to him, I can't. It's impossible. I said, well, that's exactly the fact. What you did when you posted on Facebook. You can't take that back. So these are the issues related to consumer rights. Of course, when we do projects in these areas, consumer rights becomes part of the project. What are the rights that I'm infringing on when I say that this project is required for the university? Who am I going to hurt in the process? Remember, like in a divorce, ask me. I can advise in that area. The court is on the side of the person that is being hurt. Right. Be careful. Because that's the point of departure. And you that made the accusations on the internet will always be at the lower part of that argument. Internet of Things, IoT. What are the Internet of Things? Talk to me about it. Who uses the Internet of Things? Which bank do you bank at, sir?
Everybody's
Yeah. So Standard Bank, I last night logged on to Standard Bank, IoT. Every service that you log into, Facebook, Twitter, your banking portal, Take a Lot, Want It All, dating sites, are Internet of Services. Remember, we're in the 4th generation of the Internet now. 1st generation, 2nd generation, 3rd generation. The 4th generation is the most dangerous generation to date. This is where the social media sits. This is where your consumer rights are actually for the first time touched. And this is where all the services are rendered. Blackboard, you make use of Blackboard. Everybody here, more or less. Blackboard is just another service in the Internet of Things. Major issue. And then we get to the big word, big data. Now my colleagues will tell me I think that's the most incorrect word ever in the world. It's a marketing term that IBM uses to confuse people like me. Big data is just about data. The big part is something different. But it's about data. Tell me, you know where your kids are now? Right? So you can think that's around about 11 o'clock in the morning, my kids should be at school. Where's your data? Everywhere. Everywhere. So if you value your kids and their lives, there's something more important to you perhaps. Where's your banking details now? My banking details should be, I'm at 2 banks. It's not because of wealth, it's because of debt. It's like I'm on 2 diets as well. The one doesn't give me enough to eat. It's the same thing. So I'm at 2 banks. Both of them are separate banks. I worked for Barclays and I worked for Nedbank. They don't share information. So your ID number, your address, your scalumpies, your banking detail, everything is contained at each of those banks. And you know what? Your data is not backed up in South Africa. Where's your data backed up? Law says 3 places in the world. So I think your data is in Dubai. I last saw it there. And I think also in New Delhi in India. Or Malaysia. No, I think it's New York. I flip and don't know anymore. So this is what we're dealing with when you look at data. Dangerous issue. And my colleagues will attest, that's my pet subject in IT. This is where I built my life, is in data management. And then we get to the nice one called cloud computing. Amen. We're going into cloud now for Free State University with 4 of our systems. It's like handing over your baby, your newborn baby, to somebody else. And it's actual fact exactly that. I did a cloud presentation about a week and a half ago on the campus. And I spelled out the severity of cloud. But cloud computing is a danger. The reason being we don't know how to manage it. We don't know how to handle it. We're not ready to adopt. We're not mature enough to accept the conditions and terms associated with it. Privacy. Who got offended now about the porn issue? Everybody. The reason being is I didn't acknowledge your privacy in it. The fact that you do practice porn, is becoming an issue because it's socially unacceptable. But the law accepts it. It's legal. It's like dinner. I don't ask permission to have dinner. You're enjoying it too much. I wonder why. Huh? I can feel the heat of the blush. But anyway, so privacy is a major issue. It's an issue that we have to deal with. And people get so offended when you take that privacy away. But you know what? In some instances, the reason why you feel offended is what you did to deserve what happened to you. And in many cases, why did you lose my data? Are you aware of the fact that if you send out, let me give you the path. You stand in front of a teller machine here on campus and you want to withdraw money from your account. The moment you press the submit button, where does that message go? That message goes to a switch in my data center, out to Telkom, from the Telkom switch in town to 3-4 other stations before it reaches where? Durban. There's a center in Durban where all credit card transactions are received, and then it goes from Durban to Van Renen and from Renen to whatever till it reaches the bank where it is. Your banking system then approves your transaction and it passes the whole way back, and it was 10 milliseconds. But every time that your data, your message hit another switch or a spot, there was a record made of your data. So just by pressing that submit switch, you've already made 45 to 60 copies of that transaction before it went to the bank. Right. So be careful of this. So privacy becomes an issue, and then it comes to the middle issue. We are unfortunately moving from a I trust you to a no trust, a zero trust environment. That's what we're going into. Dual factor authentication, signing onto a network. It's not because they don't like you, it's flipping, they don't trust you. And vice versa. And the last issue is AI. What does AI stand for? Yeah. Okay, but anyway. Artificial intelligence, hey. How much of your life is already maintained by artificial intelligence? A friend of mine, she's a heavy diabetic. Serious diabetic. And I once driven in a car with her, and I didn't get married to her, but I was traveling in a car with her. I was still talking to her and she passed out due to the fact that the sugar levels are rampant. She now has a little machine with a thin pipe going into her belly, right into the bloodstream. And this thing is sending messages to an internet base somewhere, IoT, Internet of Services, which constantly looks at the analysis of her blood. And that system tells the little device that she carries on her belt to inject, what do you call it, insulin into her blood. Automatically controlled. Right. So ladies and gentlemen, when people talk to you about robots, it's going to happen with or without you. It's there. It happens already. Most of the decisions, remember every transaction that you do at your bank, because this is the example that I'm giving you that's closest to your life at this stage. It's not taken by a human. It's taken by a machine. Right, so be careful of that. Now, with this background, this is part of the perspective, and this is part of what I'm telling, because this is what we're dealing with in IT at this stage. So surely there's a change management component behind this. So who of you are in IT? Given, but anyway, IT. So you might be dealing with this. Now, if you today enroll for IT degree at any university in South Africa, you must really reconsider. The profession. I read an article over the weekend. Which are the 16 top professions that are disappear in the next 5 to 7 to 11 years to 12 years type of thing? Which are the top professions that's going to disappear? A funny one was a lawyer. I thought they were gone already, but lawyers are going to because you've got a lot of artificial intelligence today to make the decisions based on a contract, whatever the case may be. So the lawyer profession, doctors, IT people, accountants, chefs, pilots. These are sought after professions, but they're going to disappear. And my dearest colleague there, right at the end, Nico, is leaving the country at the end of the year to join the All Blacks, for which I'll blame him eternally. But he's emigrating due to the fact that things are changing in such a nature. And in the world of IT is changing in the following way. And I just want to give you an idea. Look at the new roles of IT in the world. Do you see the word technology there? No. The world of IT in the future has got nothing to do with this mouse, that charger, this cable, that processor. It's disappearing. You're going to buy devices, and you already do it, your tablets. You buy them without the support. There's no support structure for them anymore. They're not supposed to break. You charge a battery and you go. This is where we're moving into these things. So all the technicians that are surrounded me here, it's not because they like me. It's because they've got a job to do as technicians. They're gone in future. Because the IT support, it says personal computer, doesn't it? Private computer. It's going to be personal to holder. It means that you don't need a technician anymore for that. So digital security, governance and compliance, a major issue in IT. Whilst working for Barclays, I was head of Data Africa, and I dealt with 26 countries in Africa where we had branches in Barclays. And not a single one of those countries had the same legislation about data. And if you start deploying a project, imagine now it's cross-party, cross-nation, cross-legislation. The complexity of what you're dealing with becomes important. Services versus the relationship management, data management, business to IT alignment, risk, BI, business intelligence, artificial intelligence, or business information and machine learning, and enterprise architecture. And I'm not going to bore you with that, but that's the future of IT. If you're an IT professional, where are you going amongst those circles? What are you going to do in future? I've got 4 more years to go or 5 more years to go, then I retire. So luckily this is not going to hit me that hard, but believe me it would. It's definitely going to, I'm going to feel it in my life, in my personal life. But you young guys that's building a career, make sure that you position yourself against some of those. Right. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is something that we've adopted. I've developed it over many years. And Nico will tell you, and Corneille will tell you, that you need to do 8 things in IT to succeed. And I'm talking about IT in the Free State University. Only 8 things. And I'm going to measure you on 8 things only. Planning, organizing, leading, control, communication, transformation, risk, and value. These are the 8 things that you need to do. Now tell me which part of your job that you're sitting in today doesn't have a component of planning? What part of your job has got an execution bit? Which part of your job you're not a leader in? Hey, stealing my IP, I see. No, I'm only joking, man. Take the photo, but you also need a photo from me. You're going to lead somebody. You're going to lead a function. You're going to lead yourself. You're welcome to the photos. I'll even send you the presentation. 120 Rand without text. Anyway, yeah. But you also need to control stuff. You also need to communicate stuff. What is transformation? It's not only the transformation in the political sense, but it's also moving an organization forward, changing things. So transformation is the most difficult component of the 8 factors that we have there. And I had my merit discussion with my colleagues this week. And we sat down and I said to Nico, it was you that had the discussion, I said to him, I think of all the dimensions that's here, the issue of transformation is the most difficult. And project management, look at this, sits across all of that. So irrespective if you're a manager in IT, you also plan, execute, lead, control, communicate, transfer, risk and value. All of that is contained within your portfolio of project management. Right. Now I'm going to the part that I'm unsure of. What is project management? Now, sorry for that. I know that I've offended in this regard. I use the Gibbs definition for project management. I shouldn't, because I should be loyal to this business school's idea. I sincerely apologize. We're equal now. Okay. But this is one of the definitions that I could make some sense of. And whenever I read a definition such as that, I try to understand what is meant by that. And the first thing that I normally do is to unpack the definition by looking at the key words or the key aspects of that definition. So look at the key aspects that I've picked up from that. And I might be wrong. There might be much more to it. But I think there's a discipline to it. What is the discipline in project management? I believe it's structure, visibility, the ability to control, the ability to measure. Those are the key aspects in project management. So there is a discipline behind it, and there's also a process. I also thought that it was some way of managing something. It's a management practice. I also thought it was a life cycle approach. Because one of the other reasons why projects fail is they always start well, and we celebrate the start, but we never get to that sign-off date at the end. And they say the longest part of the project is the last 5%. You know that. We're 95% progressed. But that last 5%, that's 18 months. While the rest of the project was 4 weeks. That's unfortunately the case. People don't reach the point where they sign off a project. And you know what? People get moedeloos and they wipe the project off the table. The only person that is damaged by by the project is you. Because you've become the bad project manager, the person that's not able to deliver. So the life cycle is important to me. It's about planning, monitoring, controlling, budgeting, resourcing. It's about time. And then the big one for me is morale. We in IT here at Free State never define a project longer than 6 months. I don't allow projects to go over my desk that's longer than 6 months. Why? I can't remember what I said 2 years ago when the project started. That's the first thing. Secondly, the project assumes a life of itself, by itself. People start living in the project, not doing their work, because I'm part of this project. And there's more other reasons as well. My problem is, you can't control that you can't remember. I can't remember how this project started 3 years ago. I need to stay in close contention with the reason why I'm doing this. I need to understand why it was necessary. And you know what? Some projects start well, but midway in the project, the business changes. And the project is no longer relevant. Then you should stop a project with at least the minimal danger of losing some of the invested value in that project. So a project longer than 6 months is not allowed in IT. Complexity, I'm going to talk about it just now. And there need to be specific objectives. You can't do a project for the sake of a project. It's not a practice run. It's to deliver something. It's a tool to deliver something. And then it needs to be aligned with the strategy and the intent of the organization. I'm not quite sure, and I think that your understanding of projects might be better than mine, but this is what I understand under projects. And from a theoretical background, you might have a better insight than I have of projects at this stage. But these are the things that I'm worried about. The morale, the end date, the start date, the resourcing, the time. Can you control it? When do you report? How can you report from a project? Etc. Now, remember this slide? I need to go back to that one. Now let's apply what we've said in project management to that. So when we do a project in digital security management, for instance, look at the drivers for this. It's an extremely complex project. It's an extremely costly project. There's international norms and standards, things that I've never heard about that I need to deploy. It's invasive. The consumer rights are touched. And it's a lot of freedom versus a very regimented way of doing it. Next issue, governance and compliance. I've already mentioned to you the influence of legislation on a project. It has a massive role to play. And that I wasn't taught in my project management days or in my MBA years ago. That was assumed that I would pick it up through osmosis or something like that. But then all of a sudden I ran into legislative sets that I didn't understand, which was problematic to me. What does GDPR stand for? What does POPI stand for? What is POPI? Yeah, Protection of Personal Information Act. Now, ladies and gentlemen, POPI has been out for, I think, the best part of 7-8 years now. It's an international standard for the protection of personal information. It's been adopted by South Africa, but there's specific areas where we don't do well, and this is one of the areas. It's been enacted, but it hasn't been enacted. So there's some issues behind POPI. But POPI is a mature practice elsewhere. So if you do a project that contains information from somewhere else, you might face issues that you're not ready for in country to face. Now, GDPR is the new standard. So even before we started implementing POPI in South Africa, they're going to wipe it off the table because GDPR is the new thing. What does it stand for? General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR. This is the standard of the European Union at this stage. It replaces POPI. GDPR makes POPI look like kindergarten stuff. I'm serious. When you think POPI, if I lose the data of the university, my chief in charge is fined $10 million per loss of data element. GDPR, they'll prefer POPI because it's be much cheaper. GDPR puts you behind bars. That's exactly what it does. Now, if you need to manage a project for which governance and compliance plays a major role, be careful of what you do in your project. It determines your project. Next issue is the issue of services and relationship. Readiness to adopt, levels of computer literacy. I made a statement the other day, ladies and gentlemen, that up to this point in our organization, an intermediate skill in Word, Excel, and PowerPoint would have been enough to carry you through. By the end of next year, you'll have to have an expert level in those three to make sense of what's going to happen in your office. When you have to deal with the data associated with it. Please, if you don't have a certificate hanging against the wall that says, this guy is certified for advanced level, expert level in Excel. Nico, how long did it take you to get to the point of emigration? Because that would be your next answer. And you're going to land up in a country where it's going to be more severe. So if there's anything that you need to specialize in before the middle of next year, make sure that your Excel skills are top-notch. Really, and levels of computer literacy. The fact that you drive Twitter, Facebook, doesn't mean that you understand applications. Right. By sending an email is basic entry-level, breathing level of IT practitioner at this stage. And that's where we're going with it. Sharing of information, understanding the role of information. Data management, and this is where I'm going off. We are moving from a transaction-driven world to a data-driven world. All the transactions are going to disappear into the background. About a year ago, I was in America, and there was about 2 years ago, I was in Switzerland. No, actually more than a few years ago in Switzerland. And I walked into a supermarket that evening, and there were no cashiers or tellers there. Nobody. The doors were open. And the only people in this supermarket were the people filling up the shelves. And I started thinking now, okay, this is going to be nice. I'm going to take what I want, and I'm not going to pay for it. That's how we shop, isn't it? So I thought this is an advanced level of shopping that I don't understand. So a person pointed me at a basket there. So you put in your credit card into this little slot, and it releases a basket or a trolley. On the bar of the trolley is a calculator. And it says, hi, Vic. No, okay. How did it get my name? It was off my credit card. Right? Your credit card allows you this level of credit. You can now shop. And you walk in amongst the shelves, and as you put things into the trolley, there's a sensor around the trolley that adds the value up. And as you shop, the value is displayed here on this bar. And as you take things out, it's a directional switch. It subtracts things. And then you get to a point you say, hey, I've spent enough euros now. How much is that in rand? But anyway, it doesn't matter. And then you say, okay, I want to check out now. You press the checkout button. It already has your credit card details, doesn't it? You actually put it in to get the trolley or the basket released. It was actually read off you in the moment you went through the door. It was read already automatically out of your pocket. And now you say to submit. All you do is when you walk out of the store now, there's another reader that quickly just checks. So what's in your basket is really what's in your basket. And it says, thank you for shopping at this place. If you return the trolley, we will refund you €1 or whatever. So you go to your car, you put it in your car, you bring the trolley back. As you push it into that cradle, you get a credit notice. Thanks for returning your trolley, Vic. €1 has been credited to your account. Done. Isn't that where we should be? Imagine managing a project like that. Think of the communication that you have to do. Think of the change management behind that. This is massive stuff. It's not small in any way. Then we get to risks, and then we get to business to IT alignment. Now, remember this slide? I'm not going to talk to you about the nature of project management because I've given you enough background to understand this now. The nature of project, that was this 4 o'clock this morning. This is the slide that I changed. Given the examples that I've just spoke about now, any project now becomes multi-party. It's not only the people around you that's part of the project. It's people sitting in Johannesburg, London, New York, New Delhi, Malaysia, vendors all over the world that's supplying your project. You've got a dependency with it. It's multinational with all these countries taking part in your project. And then it's time zone dependent. Have you ever thought of the effect of a time zone on you? Have you ever heard of the term doing business where the sun rises? Yeah? Let me tell you how it applies to me. We upgrade our systems from time to time and we shut down the university. We call it blackouts. So I talk to all my colleagues all over the show and I send out a message saying, hey, pal, you can't work this weekend. I'm going to take the systems down. If you've got any concern, please contact me in person or this person or that person. And normally they say thank you so that I can have a weekend of my own and not worry about work because you can't even read an email under those circumstances. So we switch off every system on this campus. It's a dark spot. But because I don't have all the experts on board with me in my building, I enter into what I refer to as co-pilot sessions. You know what a co-pilot session is? So from 8 o'clock today to 4 o'clock this afternoon is more or less 12 o'clock to 10 o'clock at night in Dubai. So I find an expert in Dubai that sit with me while I'm doing the changes. You know what? They get hungry and they go and sleep. And where does the sun rise next? Oh, now I need a co-pilot in Malaysia. So I line them up for 48 hours in sequence. And I keep my people out of sleep for 48 hours. And we support it from all over the world until the point where we switch on again. So time zones become important because you can't have support for your project, for your initiative, if you don't recognize the effect of time zones on your project. Social engineering, exactly what social media is forcing us now. You now have to consider the feelings of your neighbor that is so sensitive in terms of that you don't like that dog's color. How dare you? Right, I feel offended. Right? And that happens so quickly in your project because not everything that you're putting down in your project, what you're delivering, is of such a nature that people will endorse it, will adopt it, will take it on as the new way of doing things. Now you need a change management program. How do you introduce a new concept, sell it to them? Now I'm an IT person. What do I know about change? What do I know about social engineering? How do I manage the expectations, the emotions, the kickback, the pushback from people who are suffering because of and I use the word suffering in a very sensitive manner, because of what I'm doing in my project. The problem with projects are they change things that normally cannot be changed back. If you've built a bridge across this gorge, that bridge is there tomorrow and the day thereafter. There's no easy way to take it down. So most of the things that you deliver in a project has got a longevity behind them. If you make mistakes, people and the organization is going to live with those mistakes for much of the time thereafter. This is important stuff. The rights and privileges, the loss of control and ownership, privacy and trust, data, complex contracts, and who owns what after the project. Because you as a project manager only owns this thing while it's in project mode. Thereafter, it needs to belong to somebody. The handover, the handoff. Because I sit with quite a few projects that I started for a reason, I don't know why, but it seems like a good thing at the time. And the day we finish it, it says, now, okay, right, we've now finished it. Who's going to sign off? Who's going to accept this? And then we find that we've never known in the duration of the project. And you know what happened? For the duration, nobody cared if the project ran well because there was no ownership of the project. Right. If we start talking about risk management, Just want to check something. Again, I looked for a definition. And again, I started isolating the keywords from the definition. And you can read the definition. There's two, actually. And you'll see that I've done some reading from the projectmanager.com and American Project Management Association, America, whatever. But it's a process understanding. You'll find the same words there again. It's much like project management, but with a different area. It's still management. It's still management. How do I typify management? Your ability to plan, execute, lead, control, communicate, transformation, risk and value. Those 8 things. And they all apply to management of projects. They all apply to the management of risks. They all apply to the management of change. All of that becomes important. But look at the keywords here. Process, optimizing, minimizing, maximizing, all the Z's. Proactive approach. It's about analysis. It's about response. It's about start to end. It's about control. What else do I need to know about risk? Those are the essentials of risk management for me. So, I asked the question just now, how many risks can you identify in a project? In my small mind, there's how many? 4, 5, 7. Are there any that I didn't take into account? And I'm sure the answer is yes. The project background against which you execute your project identifies risks other than those, for instance. You might have a project that doesn't have a strategic or a reputational risk attached to it. Unfortunately, we work for the Free State University now. The moment a project fails, Facebook, these guys got no idea what they're doing. Right? Next moment, 4,000 followers. Next day, papers rock up at your office. Hey, I think you failed. Can I get an article on this issue? Next day becomes a bargaining chip in some other council somewhere. Reputational risk, strategic risk. Those are the issues that we are faced with today in terms of our project. So make sure that you understand the basis of the risk. But more importantly, how to communicate what you're dealing with. Just before this session, I came from a senior management meeting of the university where we had to look at a multi-million project for the future. And I must tell you that the executive of this university, especially Professor Peterson, is no fool. He asked questions that I couldn't answer, that I never anticipated he would answer. And you guess what? He never saw the presentation before this morning. But that's the type of input that you need to consider when you define a project. Because you must be able to ensure that you are trusted with this project to answer those questions, to make sense of it. And I think within the project scope and structure, there's enough opportunity to do so. Right, communication management. Again, 2 definitions. It's about keeping people in the loop. It's about everybody now. It's about the planning process, because no communication should go without planning what you want to say. You can't make up the message as you go, like I'm doing now. But anyway, you can't plan it as you go. You need to know what you need to say, and say it in the clearest way. And then you need to understand the who, the what, the format, and the when. I can tell my best friend, man, hey man, get lost. And he wouldn't be offended, but if I shouted the same at him, he would be offended. The way that you communicate in your project becomes a major issue. So, in terms of communication, who do you need to involve? Your stakeholders, external, internal, your third-party vendors, and your project in the project itself, the communication on progress, execution, and all of those issues. And then the same applies to change management. Again, the definition tells me there's a process involved, and the word process comes up again and again and again. It's about the tools that you use in your change. It's about the techniques and models that you use, or the methods. And remember, change is about people. Systems fail 90% of the time because the people don't believe the system, don't want the system. It could be a good system, but the people feel it's too difficult to manage, or it asks too much of me. And people just write off systems after you spend 20 million on putting this new beautiful engine into the organization. It disappears. Is to achieve business results, to build on the body of knowledge what you know because you don't want to actually repeat what you said, and to optimize the business benefits. Same as in the project management, in terms of change, is to align, constantly align. And that you do through communication. So change happens through one of the methods, and that method is communication. Second, your operational change, your financial change, your technology change, and the services change that you will introduce. Okay, I've now told you what I wanted to tell you. Now I'm going to tell you what I told you, the last part of my presentation. And I want to start off with this. The worst place to be is in the middle. When elephants fight, the grass gets trampled. Don't be the grass in your project. You're always going to have people that's pushing the project, people not accepting the project. And if you become the ham in the sandwich, you're going to be eaten like the rest. So when elephants fight, don't be the grass, because that's going to be a major issue for you in your project management. Putting it all together is the synthesis. Upper right-hand corner, you'll see that all little circles are red now. So I'm looking at all four of those quadrants. And I'm looking at project management. I saw looking at risk management. Did you see the spelling mistake, ladies and gentlemen? I'm looking at communication management and change. Now they're all looking for the spelling mistake and not hearing a word I'm saying. I had a friend many years ago. He had a stutter, but a bad one. And he was a great friend of mine. And he could do no other job because that was the type of person that he was. So he became a nature conservationist. Elephants and trees don't worry if you have a stutter. So it suited him well. But he grew up and he liked snakes. And he was a serpentologist. Serpent, snake, devil, you know that type. Oh, but anyway, serpentologist later in his life. And later got a master's degree and a doctorate. And he specialized in snakes. And he was once invited to a ladies' tea where he had to deliver a speech on snakes. Now, I told you about Fafani. He had a stutter. He couldn't string two words together. And he did what I did now. He took a box, an apple box. You know these big apple boxes? And he took a piece of sacking and he put it on top of it. And he tied it with a piece of wire around it. And as he entered the room with this box, everybody thought there was a snake inside. So he put it right there, and every now and then, when he started to stutter, he just kicked the box and everybody would look at the box. And he delivered his speech in a very smooth way. Nobody ever wondered about his stutter. So if you look at the spelling mistakes, now kicking the box now, I'm looking at project management, risk management, communication management, and change management. And if I start looking at commonalities, the topic says synthesis, putting it together, I think that the coming together of project management, which are the four, change management, risk, and communication, how they are put together is that there's always a process and an approach. There's no textbook, no methodology, PMBOK and all those nice things that you are used to, that tells you how to put those things together. Because I think it's different for every person. It's linked to your personality in the way that you interpret stuff. So if you look at these, all of them, I tried to mark them in red. They're about a process and they're about an approach. Second thing that struck me, it's about criticality and it's about complexity. And I tried to highlight the common themes there. So there's commonality and there's criticality and complexity in all four of those areas. And you as a person, as a project manager, need to balance where you understand a very complex project and you need to communicate that to a senior executive that's got no idea what you're talking about. And it's not because they're stupid. It's because they've got another job to do. Don't ever think that if an executive says, that he's not fooling you. I saw that this morning. There was a lot of hers. But if you look at the questions asked after the time, there was a lot of understanding. So it's about complexity and criticality. A predefined objective. You can't initiate a change management program if you don't know what you need to change. You can't communicate if you don't need what to communicate. You can't manage if you don't know what to manage. So these are the commonalities that we're talking about. And then there's also other considerations. So all of the integration that I spoke about today is about a process and an approach. It's about complexity and criticality. It's about predefined objectives and considerations. And that's where it brings us now to say the elephant in the room, what we need to deal with today, in terms of your own makeup, your understanding of where you are in terms of this, is that what you need to deal with. And the only way to deal with it is to componentize it, understand each of the components. Who said divide and conquer? Who made that statement? No, it wasn't Julius Caesar. The guy with the hand in the jacket. French guys, short. Kort mannetjie syndrome. Napoleon, yeah, I told you. He did exactly that. Divide and conquer. But if you've got to manage all of that in one go, it's a complex issue. So you need to find ways in yourself to manage the complexity, to manage how you deal with them individually, but also as a whole, but also in combination. Because it might be that you're dealing with an approach and a process and predefined objectives, or any mutation of that, or permutation thereof. That becomes important. So, in an IT project, if you look at predefined objectives, those are the issues that we normally risk or list for that matter. So, your objectives, you plan to mitigate a project risk. You plan to mitigate change. You plan to enable projects. You plan to control. Next one. If you're dealing with process, predefined approach, ladies and gentlemen, make sure of your processes. Be sure of your next step, because people normally challenge you on where you're going, not where you've been. Because that's where they have an uncertainty themselves. If you can answer the next step question, you've won the battle. Because they're always going to blame you for the past without knowing where they're going themselves. And that makes you a leader to say, but this is the next step. This is where I'm going. And perhaps the step thereafter is this, but this is where we're going in the longer term. Remember the 8 dimensions? To plan, then to execute, then to lead, to control, communicate, transformation, risk and value. All of that falls in place. The moment you start dealing with these things, either in themselves or as a combination with different permutations or as a whole. And this is the important bits now. When we're dealing with complexity and criticality, complexity is not only in risk. Complexity is not only in communication. Complexity lies in how you put these things together, how you understand them, how you manage them at the end of the day. And lastly, or slide before this, I think the considerations still remain that whenever you deal with communication or change, ask yourself the question, does it fit into the intent of the strategy of this organization? Because we sometimes start off with good intent, but the project ends there while the strategy is going there. And we find quite often that these projects do. Is it for business improvement? Do we have benefits that we can get out of the project? Does it add to the body of knowledge? Is it for continuous improvement? How's the quality? And lastly, what's the risk and mitigation? And then I thought, okay, if that is the case, how do we put it all together? And this is the flow that I could determine from that. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to end my session with you today with the next slide, because if this doesn't work for me, this is where I'm going. Okay. I'm prepared to take questions, and Nico will answer them. All right.
Thanks, Vic. I think that was extremely insightful, and I think your storyline flowed so nicely, and you kept us engaged. Thank you for that. Audience, this is your chance. That bugging thing that you have there at the office, that thing that's stuck in your project, please ask Vic to solve it for you.
I feel like a Gupta now.
Okay, so we'll go to a lucky draw then.
Any questions, ladies and gentlemen? Makes me feel good on the one side, but it also worries me on the other. So it's a lot of mixed feelings. It's like your mom-in-law driving over the cliff with your new car. That mixed feeling that you get. Right.
Yes, thank you. I want to ask,
Can I know your name, please?
Oh, Ayavuya.
Vuya.
Ayavuya, yes.
Are you?
Yeah. You mentioned that don't be the grass when two elephants are fighting. So I want to ask, in terms of stakeholder management, when there's one party that wants the project and the other doesn't want the project, how do you manage?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that.
Okay, Nico, I don't know how to. I think it's an excellent question. I think you need to be an ice cream to really please everybody. No, that's my point of departure. And it's not arrogant when I say that. So my reality is at this stage, and I think you need to acknowledge your reality. I've got a job to do. My job is to manage this project, right? The term that I use in IT is with or without you. So I'd like, no, this is really the case, and it sounds very hard-asked or very arrogant, but it's not. I've got a job to do, and I'm paid dearly for this job. My job is to manage the project. Allow me to manage the project because I'm aware of the change management issues, as I've indicated. I'm aware that you are now part of my risk profile, and I include them in my risk profile, because that's where the project can fail. What I've found in the past, that's just from the theoretical side, is I let the person who's got the issue with the project define the benefits as he or she sees it. And then I give the real benefits to them. And you'll find that 99% of what frustrates them is actually what they want in the project. So you need to change their minds in terms of benefits. But remember, there's a lot in it for me. And emphasize that. If I do this, it's a change management initiative to say, but you'll get this. And I'm going to train you to use it. 90% of the pushback that I get on projects, and Nico will tell you that, has got nothing to do with the project itself. It's about fear. Will this project replace my job? Will the product that I'm putting down or the service replace me as a person? The short answer is most likely yes. But not today, not tomorrow. I'm having tough discussions with my people at this stage, right as we're speaking now. You know it's impossible to promote anybody in IT nowadays? Close to impossible. Because people reach a level in IT very quickly in their lives that is preventing them to move to the next level. And most of it's linked to qualifications, and it might be in your area as well. I can't enforce you to study. I can't enforce that you do this. And that's why I emphasize. I have a one-on-one discussion with each of my staff members. I try to do it twice a year. I bring them in and I tell them, tell me where you're going with your life. In your personal life, in your professional life, and in your work life. And people start telling me about their kid that's unhappy at school, or he's unhappy in his marriage. And all of a sudden you can relate some of that stuff to why he's unhappy in his job. It's not because I want to know why, when is he getting divorced or whatever. I want to know what influences him to ask the questions that he answers. And I get a lot of data from that. So I've got line managers in my area, and I have one-on-one discussions. They call it confession sessions in my apartment. They come for a confession session, feel like a priest. But I need to change the minds earlier. The later that you change those minds of resistance, the more difficult it becomes. There might be other areas that I'm missing at this stage, but I need to first act on it immediately. Secondly, fully understand why there's pushback. Thirdly, allow them to define the benefits and align that with what their perceptions of the project is. Because if you allow them to define the benefits, somewhere in their psyche they see those benefits. And sometimes they measure themselves against it. And sometimes, or many instances in my life, that has resolved the issues that I have at that point. But you know, it doesn't only apply to project management, it applies to other areas as well. Management is not a nice place. Everybody wants to be there. Very unfriendly, a very cold place. Right. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, and also thanks, Vic, for clarifying it in that way, because we've positioned this project management certificate that the guys are taking part in from an organizational strategy execution perspective. So once you take an organizational strategy perspective on project prioritization that his question was also about, you go look and see if you can quantify the benefits of this project in terms of what the business requires, then personal agendas automatically lose credit because it doesn't align with organizational strategy. The sad part is probably that if you ask the guy what's the organizational strategy and priorities, he probably won't know. So yeah, interesting. Any other questions?
No. Can I ask that you use the mic? I'm 59 years of age. These years as well, eh? So.
Hi, Professor Vic. Thank you for the presentation.
And your name?
Absolutely bontle Valdebies.
Okay. The right response is to say I'm sorry about it. But anyway, I apologize. All right?
Thanks for the presentation, but I would like to know, do you believe that there are risks that are unmanageable, especially
Do I believe
from
that?
the risks that are not manageable, especially if it's from the top, from a communication perspective.
I see what you mean. Okay.
Especially it's from the top, and it's affecting stakeholders, external stakeholders. If there's a misalignment in, a future or perhaps a strategy going forth.
You're really challenging me now. Okay. Let me reiterate that I seem to understand you correctly. Do I believe that there are risks that are unmanageable, right? Because from wherever they come. Not necessarily from the top, but they can come from other sources as well. I think the responsible answer is yes and no, and let me motivate why I'm saying so. Sometimes risks are posed in a manner to make them unmanageable because there's an agenda behind them, right? And there's ways to actually find out what this agenda is. I do a driver analysis normally when I'm faced with such an issue. So how do I do a driver analysis? I draw a picture. You know mind maps? Get yourself a mind map. It's a wonderful tool. So I put the issue in the middle, and I start adding context words the way I understand it. And if I find words that align to the strategy or the intent of the organization, I can normally build the pathways to that. And the words that don't align normally tell you a different story. So I do what we call a cause and effect, a karma diagram, or a fishbone analysis of these things, to get to the root cause of the issue. So firstly, I unpack everything that I understand about those risks, even if it's unmanageable. I look at what is aligned to the strategy or the intent of the organization. And then I take the words that don't align and try and make sense to them. And I normally put them into agenda because it might be those words. So I've got after that analysis, I've got a part that I understand and a part that I assume. You're far better off already than where you were to say that they're unmanageable. And then you can build your responses to them. But that's what I would do in that case. Are you faced with that at this stage? Okay. I think it's a difficult position to be in, especially if you are also threatened by that. And I believe from your smile it looks like it in any case. I've been there, my dear. I've been there.
Good morning, Prof. My name is Lolo.
Yes?
Mine is not so much a question, but rather a comment and a frustration, and it goes to communication management. And you'll find that in most cases it comes from the external stakeholders where you need to proceed with your project, but because of the inefficiency from their part and delivering the information that you require for you to proceed with your project, it's always a big frustration, and a lot of times it impedes on the progress of the project, which you find in my case I deal a lot with municipalities where we know that there's a lot of inefficiencies, depressed municipalities, and that's where you find for one to proceed with the project, you get so stuck because within the municipalities, for example, I use them as an example, there's a lack of information or people that don't actually know what information to give going forward. And it causes, a huge impediment on the project. Yeah.
I'm glad it's not a question because I wouldn't know where to start answering it. So I took knowledge of the fact that you're making a statement, but I would like to react to that in one way or another. Can I, and I'm not saying it's in your case, has got any relevance in your case at this stage, but I also find that I catch myself allowing that to happen to me. Right. I allowed myself to become the victim. The moment you become the victim, you become a follower, not a leader. It's part of it. And when you're a project manager, you're never a follower. You should always be a leader. So I would try to get out of that situation. I'm sorry, you didn't ask me for opinion, but I want to respond in the following way, is that most of the things that happen to us is because we allow them to happen to us. I'm going to use another word that I shouldn't. This is a civilized discussion. But the same guy that was my mentor at Sasol called it strontologie. I don't know if you know the word. To make a science of? No, all the nice brown stuff. And I'm sometimes worried about these things. I come from industry where language is used in self-defense. It's not used to smooth anybody. I think the municipalities are in a very dangerous place at this stage. They're caught between two very serious forces at this stage. I don't think that they really understand the scenario they're in, and neither do I, and neither do the community. There's only a few people that is privileged to that type of thing. I don't know how to become not to be victim in that regard. That I need more context on, because in some way or another, I will go back to the basics of project management if I you. and manage the project for what it is. What is the timeline? When is the due date? When is the delivery? Enforce that. Put the change behind it. Stay clinical. Don't get involved in the surrounding areas of each of those issues. I don't think there's another way to survive at this stage.
Given this multiple options that we have in terms of communication and the media available, and also the diversity of the workforce that we typically have to communicate, and then I'm talking internal, I'm talking also external stakeholders. Not looking for a right or a wrong answer, because it's different, like you say, for every project. But in your experience in the university, given the diversity, given all the communication options, is there a best practice that you have come across? Just to give you an example, I read your emails because I am a reader, but I might be 10% of the audience that read that email when it comes along. Other would prefer a short video clip. What have you found out to work well in your communication?
I'm going to give you an answer that you might not prefer. I first create due diligence and then comfort. I first need to show that I've made that communication. I need something on paper. I need to show that I've made the comment, that I've sent the comment, and then I can tick the boxes to say that you should have received it. Due diligence. And then I will look at the alternatives behind it. So my first communication is always the reader type of communication. The second one would be, and I seldom get the feedback in that regard, and it's for the first time that I really realized that there are other channels. My second one would be a video, a YouTube video type of thing. And funny enough, we looked at 2 videos in this week that we're sending out to the community regarding Skype for Business, new stuff that we're putting in now, and we started looking at the videos. But mine is first due diligence, because I'm normally trapped up on the fact that people say you didn't do it. I didn't get the email. I can show that you did. Right, so due diligence is a matter. But you're totally right. Okay, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, is there another question?
Last round. Oh, and another one there? Sorry.
Okay, no, it's fine.
I'm Katlego. And that Vic,
I've got a Katlego on my team. We call him Bob. Right.
okay, I would just like to draw on your experience, Dr. Vic. You started with a statement saying that 80% of most projects fail. Ne? So now, I heard you talking about a few projects that you've worked on, particularly in the University of the Free State. Ne? And if and when a project fails, ne, your project team, how is the response of your project team when you try to get to join a new project or different project? What is their attitude towards their new project, and how do you deal with that?
Okay. I think really Nico is better qualified at this stage to answer this question, but you can expect the answer from me. Firstly, I don't allow people to become accustomed to a project, right? So they've got the 6 months and they're off the project in any case. And they need to know that they're going back to where they came from. Because if you create uncertainty in one way or another, that they don't have a job beyond whatever the project, it creates an issue. So when we actually, the other thing that I don't do is I never dedicate people to a project as a full-time resource. I always keep you in your original job and add the project to that. And because there's a good reason for it. I'd rather take some of your tasks away to allow you to work on the project, but you're always responsible for your job. It anchors you in the organization. You fulfill your position. You're not part of a floating team out there somewhere. So sometimes I link it to a job, and sometimes I link it to an area of interest. You'll find that I will sometimes say to people, I've got this project, who wants to take part in it? Because if you've got interested people, you've got people that like the outcome of this. And I think that's one of the mechanisms that I use.
Okay, hello, good afternoon.
Hello, madam.
My name is Kila Bukhile. My question is regarding data management, because I realize that you are a CIO for the institution. So I want to ask you in terms of standards in terms of data management, security and restoration for any organization. Is it an individual's responsibility or an organization's responsibility to make sure that whatever the information that whatever work, for example, I do for my organization, am I the one who's supposed to be securing it, managing it, making sure that if maybe we have a situation like in Mangaung where the information was lost, that is the responsibility of the organization or as me who's working in this organization? So I just want to check that, especially in terms of the issues of backups, to say who is in terms of international standards, who is supposed to make sure that whatever critical information that I'm producing for the organization, it's backed up or is there in case we have a disaster.
Okay, complex question. I would just like to ask one question. Is there clarity in your mind between data and information? I don't care to lose information. That's got nothing to do with me. It's no real damage. That's the emphasis that I want to place on it. Because if I give you the number 9, for instance, and I say in the financial world it might mean 9%. In the engineering world, that same 9 means 9 degrees. In the world of whatever, that 9 gets a different level of significance. That is information. It's what you add in the interpretation of data. So if I lose data, the 9, I'm exposing the organization, not the interpretation. That's the first thing. So if information is lost, it's more or less linked to data loss, because nobody really, and perhaps me myself, understand the difference between data and information. But then normal humanity kicks in. We need to blame someone. Someone needs to take the fall for the loss of this. And this is where due diligence becomes important. If I can prove from my office that I did everything that is required from me to protect the data, to back it up, to keep it under lock and chain, I've done what the law requires from me, and I can step away. But once I've given you this presentation stick, this presentation is on the stick, and if you want it, you can get it. I've given a lot of the intellectual property away of the organization. Me as a human to you is now the reason for the loss of the data. And it's got nothing to do with the digital security, the fact that it's backed up. So we need to find the point of the leak before we start accusing and blaming people.
Listen, Vic, from the business school side and from the advanced project management program side specifically, thanks a lot. It was a great perspective that you gave us. And because of the way of the world and everything moving in a digital direction, it was so nice to get this whole digital view on how we deal with projects, the objectives we want to achieve, the risks that might threaten it, and the required communication and change that goes with it. If I had to grade you, I would have to say that you interpreted the request perfectly and you hit the nail on the head. Thank you so much. And also for the way that you did it. Very engaging. Thank you so much. And here's a small token of our appreciation.
Thank you.